Thank you for joining us at Gut Feeling. Today, this is my first video I'm putting together. I'm here with Brandy Schade. She's a certified Gallup Strengths Finder coach, and today we are going to talk about Strengths Finder. How are you doing, Brandy?
I'm doing well, Yusra. How are you?
I'm doing great.
Good.
So Brandy and I met this year in March when she came with Saber to do a workshop for the UTD ATEC students here, and it was focused on careers in user experience and design. So you came here and you brought in basically the Strengths Finder aspect of talking to students, and I think majority of the students that were here have never even heard of Strengths
Correct.
Finder. What was your experience like, and first of all, how did you come across Strengths Finder?
Mm-hmm.
What's your story behind this Strengths Finder?
Yeah, so Strengths Finder was introduced to me years and years ago by my brother. And so he had me take the assessment, and I think he had taken it. I don't know why he'd taken it. He's into a lot of personality books and assessments and that kind of stuff. He likes to be very self-aware.
Okay.
And so he recommended it to me, and so I took it, and I loved my results. I thought, man, nothing has ever described me in the way that this thing did, and gave me so much clarity about who I was and why I had made a lot of the decisions that I had made in my life. So, for example, I used to ask myself why I wasn't an Olympian. All right, I was like extremely athletic, loved to practice, loved to master things, but I kept jumping around and I kept doing different things. So it was like I would master something to a certain point, and then I would just be bored and I would leave it and try the next thing. And so I couldn't quite figure out, like, why would I do that? Why wouldn't I just stay with something long term,
Right.
one thing, and become great at it?
So why?
So I have the strength learner.
Oh.
And learners love to learn something. They love to master it. But within a couple of months even,
Yeah.
they'll feel like they reach the point that they wanted to master it at, and they move on and go to the next thing because they want to learn something else now.
So I have learner too.
Yeah.
Learner is my second top.
Okay.
Like my number one is ideation, and then learner.
Learner is my number 2 as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I feel like that was a problem. I have been in
Yes.
the same boat as you. Like
Yes.
I am learning about, currently my newest obsession is learning about stocks and bonds.
Yes.
But like a month ago I was learning about something else.
Yes.
And then I was learning about chiropractor research and what kind of medicine. I mean, I am constantly learning, and I'm trying, and I go in there and I learn as much as I can, and then I find a new door to open, and I
Right.
go in there.
Right.
And but the thing is that for the longest time I had thought that this was a weakness. Because
Me too.
Really?
Me too.
So
Yeah. So what was interesting, because I'm an achiever learner.
Okay.
So I would go hard and I would achieve things and I would learn them and I'd master them, and then I'd, like I said, go on to the next thing. And so I never felt like I was sticking with something long enough to actually become something.
right.
And even at work, as I got older, I would, want to become a project manager, and then a business analyst, and then a programmer, and then, process improvement consultant. I was actually a consultant at some
Yeah.
point in my life. So I did all these different types of roles. And it was literally like master it within 6 months, extend it to the year to do the job, and then no more thanks.
Yeah.
I need to do something else, need to
You
be
need
on a different
something
project.
different.
I need to learn how to do something different, like be a financial analyst or
Yeah.
whatever it was. So interestingly enough, although you might feel like it's a weakness, what I was doing for myself was becoming very knowledgeable about the whole business, because I was going all around the business doing different roles and seeing all sides of it, which gave me a much bigger picture about the business instead of being just a subject matter expert in one little silo on something. And so it may feel like a weakness at certain points in your life, but I also think in the right environment, it can become a strength over time as you master a variety of different things. And what it also allows me to do now that I am a strengths coach, is it allows me to relate to a large variety of people.
So you're learning about people constantly.
Yeah, now I'm
Okay.
learning about people for sure. I mean, so this is a good point, Yusra. My strengths are achiever, learner, relator. And that learner relator is loving to learn about people.
Loving to learn. Oh, I see.
And then
Okay.
I like to help them do what? Achieve.
Achieve. Oh my goodness. Okay, I have goosebumps. But okay, so the way your strengths are. So like my ideation, learner,
Yes.
woo, positivity, and intellection. So the combination of these strengths, that means something.
That makes you extremely unique. So if you have all 34 strengths to choose from, not that you choose it, but it's 34 strengths in the assessment, you get 5 of those. Yeah. And then you get a very specific order.
Okay.
And that matters.
Order matters.
There are 33 million permutations.
Okay.
We all say combination, but it's actually permutation. So that makes you 1 in 33 million.
Okay.
And that's if you have, a normal strength set. Some people have really rare strengths, so they would be even more rare. So yeah, you are 1 in 33 million just looking at your top 5 strengths, top 5 only, in the specific order that they come out, which means you have something extremely unique to add to this world. Extremely unique value. If you are engaging all 5 of those strengths all at once in whatever it is that you're doing.
How do I know if I'm engaging them?
So, you'll feel whether you're engaging certain strengths or not, right? So, like, if you're all of a sudden bored, guess what's no longer engaged?
Learner.
Your learner.
Yeah. And then I'll tell you one thing. Ideation was, even though I know now that it's my strength, but for the longest time, just like how learner I felt like was my weakness, because I wanted to learn something and then move on to the next, because it was like I couldn't decide what I wanted to do for a career, because I like learning everything, and I would be so excited to get into the next chapter and learn something new.
Right.
Ideation and learner combined was just driving me crazy, and I don't know if that's actually how it works, but
ideation drives most people crazy. Yes.
I had so many ideas. I was literally like not able to sleep at night, because it was not a bad thing. It was so much excitement. Like I would just have ideas about products, about strategy, about companies, and I meet people and I have conversations with them. I mean, I have a passion of having conversations with people, and there's so many light bulbs that go in my head, and that kind of became like a problem, for me. And it can be a problem today too, but I've learned to kind of calm it down. I meditate and, step back and use a whiteboard to write things down.
I think you make some really good points here, because let's say you are in a very formal environment like school, and you're supposed to be sitting there, not speaking, listening, being a very studious person. You're probably sitting there just...
Right.
Going crazy. It's not necessarily the right environment for you to excel. Now, you're a learner, of course.
I love school.
You love learning, right? But sitting there, being quiet, being studious for long periods of time without the social part of it, or having to be like, staring at a computer screen for long periods of time, it can probably get a little bit like, I can do this for a while, but it's really not fun for me. Where if you were in an environment where the learning was very interactive learning, and you were allowed to be creative and express yourself and have your ideas, and then people would pick them up and turn them into something, and then you got to be extremely social and talk to everybody, and you got to be positive and you got to be extroverted, like that learning environment for you would be way better in the sense of you would say, okay, I'm excelling in this environment with my strengths, where a quiet person might not excel in that environment as much, right? They need a quiet time, introverted person, right? They need their quiet time, need no noise around them to think.
Right.
And so what's interesting, my point I'm trying to make is that if you have environments that you're placing yourself in where your strengths are allowed to be their strengths and are allowed to be themselves, then you will excel in that environment.
Yeah. And you're absolutely right about when I go to the library, oh my gosh, I see people, like students are sitting in like that little box thing and they're just doing their homework. I'm like, that is like, I don't know, it's like depression too. When you're sitting in like a box and they're just like, I've had people like, hey, you want to go to the library and get work done? And we get there and they're just like sitting and I'm like, I thought we were going to chat, and it's a quiet zone. Like, this is how I get. For me, like, getting work done is like, sit down, have a discussion, like, come together, collaborate together, bring ideas together. So I do, but there is an intellection side of me, right? So I do love to just sit and do my research, and like, I write down. I'm the kind of person that watches TV and takes notes, and there's some great stuff. I mean, if you watch documentaries.
What do you do with the notes?
I watch documentaries. And then I go back and I Google. I'm like, this is interesting.
Yeah.
So, so I do have that side of me. But I think overall, like, I'm very just like a people person, you know. I took Myers-Briggs couple of years ago, well, several years ago, and I was an ENFP. And then when I took that, I was not sure exactly what to make of that because it said like you're an extrovert, and I felt like that was a label that I had to be responsible for. I am an extrovert. I have to carry this. I have to be an extrovert all the time. That's how I felt. And I like how the Strengths Finder doesn't tell you whether you're an extrovert or introvert.
Right.
You know?
Right. So ideation could be introverted or extroverted depending on the person.
Yeah.
You know, your learner makes you more of a consultant where not only do you love to learn, but you might like to teach something as well. So that is an area where you might become extroverted is in a teaching format.
I see.
Yeah. And then your woo, of course, is just extroverted.
Yeah.
And then positivity is usually, it doesn't have to be introverted, extroverted, but it is a push towards creating a positive environment for others. The motivation is creating that positivity.
Yeah.
And what was your intellection, right?
Yeah.
And that's your introverted side.
Yeah.
So most people who have intellection, especially really high, are more introverted than extroverted.
Absolutely,
So I love that you point that out because you're right. Myers-Briggs will say introverted, extroverted. Mine was always introverted.
Yeah.
But people are like, you seem so extroverted. And I'm like, in certain situations, I'm extremely extroverted, like one-on-one situations with my relator, or in a teaching environment. I'm very extroverted in that environment because
so
of the
environments
learner.
can change. That's true.
Yeah, they can bring out your extroversion, introversion, that kind of thing.
Yeah. So, Brandy, how early do these strengths start to develop? Like, how do you, like, if somebody didn't take a strengths finder, do you think they can tell what kind of strengths they have?
So, let me ask you, how old were you when you realized you had a ton of ideas?
I think probably like 6 or 7, actually.
I think I had a planner at 6 or 7.
Yeah? That's interesting. I didn't even know there was a such thing as a planner. So I'm not much of a planner, but now I have learned in order to control my ideation side, I need to have
But
some
isn't that
kind of
interesting?
planner.
Like, I have the strength of discipline, and disciplined people usually have some sort of planner because we're very time conscious.
Okay.
And we like to plan everything out to be very efficient.
I see.
And it's not that we're inflexible. We can change a schedule, but if somebody comes and changes something, we have to change everything.
Yeah,
You know, to refit it. It's kind of an engineering a little bit thinking.
So people can like start to see or feel their strengths or apply their strengths as early as probably like 6, 7 years old.
Sure. And I think that when you're in an environment, you will understand like if you have certain strengths or not. So like, for example, when I was placed in the school environment, I learned a whole lot about myself.
Okay.
Because that was an experience and that brought out certain things within me. So I'm kind of the mindset where we're all born with a certain genetic code, but it's not until we have experiences that we start to understand ourselves and understand our own genetic codes.
Right.
You know, I was telling you earlier that there was a strength I had that I didn't know I had it until I took the assessment. And I was, 30 years old when I took the assessment. And so I thought, okay, I have this strength called relator. What is it? What do I do with it? It says it's a strength. I've never even thought of this as a strength before. And as I started messing around with like they give you ideas of things that you need to do. And so I just said, okay, I'll just go, me and my discipline, I'll just go execute, the things that the book is telling me to do. And I couldn't believe how well it worked for me. So I used to work all the way through lunches. Was an achiever. So I would sit there and I would achieve all day long. But it said take lunch breaks and go have one-on-one lunch breaks with people and build your network.
To understand your relator, basically.
I couldn't believe it. Like I started making friends and I was happier, and then I was connecting others as well. And I built this wonderful network around me of people that really cared about me and I cared about them, and it made my whole world more fulfilling. And I would not have known that had Gallup not told me to go do that in that book.
I think after I took Strengths Finder way before I met you. And it was because one of my previous bosses, he, like the first day, he brought me the book. We went to like a half price bookstore and he was like, this
I
is
need
the best
to meet
book.
him.
Oh, he's great. He's great. And he was like, you need to read this book and you should take this test. And it was my like first week of orientation, so I just took the test. I feel bad. But the thing is that I didn't understand what was happening, right? I got my strengths, I sent it to him, and he was like, this is incredible. you have a really cool combination of strengths. And, you know, and I was like, okay, that's great.
Yeah.
And I was pretty happy
Glad
about
you
that.
approve.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
was like, this
Now
is
what?
great. I think that's part of the orientation. You take the test.
Sure.
And then I didn't know what to do with that. So when you came here and you actually walked me through in front of a whole group of people with my strengths,
Actually,
it's available online.
It is online.
and she told me never to do anything and be in a role where I'm telling people what to do. So, but one of the things I did realize from that is a lot of things that I thought that were my weakness were my strengths.
Yes.
So I'm a lot more confident, and I feel like I understand how I work a little bit better.
And you feel like you understand what you bring to the table as well.
Exactly.
What you do and what you don't. And you know, I don't know why, but it seems to be a wake up call for everybody that they're not good at everything. You know, when I sit down with clients, they want to be everything, and it's like, can you be everything? Can you be great at everything? And that realization hits you and goes, you know, I'm probably not going to be good at everything.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Now that we've gotten there, let's figure out what you are actually really good at.
Yeah.
And when we do that, like you said, it's empowering.
Yeah.
And it builds confidence of, I don't have to be good at this and this and this and this. I just need to be excellent at these things here.
Do you think, like for me, like, because I have a neuroscience background and I am really passionate about decision making, do you think the combination of strengths a person has, like my combination of strengths, do you think that impacts the kind of decisions I make?
I do. Because if you have strategic, for example, you're probably more of a risk taker kind of personality. And if you have a combination of different strengths like strategic and command, you're probably even more of a risk taker. Where if you're deliberative, you are going to lay out every option and every feature around that option. Let's say we're buying a car, every single car, every single feature, and then you're going to weight every single point system around this and see what the outcomes are. And you're still not going to make a decision based on your point system. Now you're going to feel, how do you feel? So a deliberative person is going to take a much longer time making a decision, but they usually make a decision it's very sound and they're very happy with their decisions and they don't have that buyer's remorse, for example.
I see.
Where other people who have strengths that are just more risk taking, they're not going to have time for that, right? They're just gonna be like, I'm just going to do this. If it's the wrong decision, I will turn around and make a different decision. Activators are like that.
I think for me, my decisions are gut feelings. I think, but it's like a calculated gut feeling. You know, I do calculate, and I think one of the things, one of the conversations that we had is with my husband. So we have different strengths.
Yes.
So, and now that I understand his strengths and he understands my strengths, we let each other take a lead and say, okay, this is your category.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
That's a partnership. That's collaboration, and saying, you know, you are so much better here, and I love that about you, so can you please go ahead and just exercise that? And then that empowers the other person, and they feel good about what they bring to the table, and then they actually get to practice and develop their own strength, flex that muscle, and feel valued for it. So that's wonderful.
Strengths Finder is not just to figure out your career, but it's to figure out overall, like, what's your core, like what kind of a person you are, you know?
Absolutely.
For me, like, now my husband's top strength is empathy, and then he has responsibility in there and adaptability. I mean, he's a great husband. He has all those strengths that you would want in a partner. But now I know that, like, when we sign up for something, he's going to be the more responsible one, because and he is.
He thrives on that responsibility.
He thrives on that. So, and then he connects with people in a much different way than I do. I'm a woo, and he's an empathy. So it's like two different types of connections, right? I meet a lot of people. He spends that one-on-one with each person, and, you know, has that really solid, you know, great connection.
Yeah, and a lot of people ask this question, you know, does my significant other, is my significant other and myself too different? And so I think one of the things that we talked about was that you guys also have connecting strengths as well. Positivity, woo, and woo and positivity, you find them together a lot in the Strengths Finder set. And you had another connecting one. What was it? I don't remember, but But so what couples ask me is, are we too different? And if you were exactly the same,
Yeah.
you would be totally bored with one
I
another.
see.
You
Okay.
would have nothing to offer one another. You'd have the same things that you're bringing to the table. So you don't see that often, like where people are exactly the same and coming together. But you do see good partnerships where you have a couple that you connect on. Like, for example, I have learner and you have learner, so we connect on learner.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
And that's how we are like relating and
I
getting
see.
along, and we're interested because we're connecting. I also have intellection in my sixth or seventh spot, which you
Okay.
have in your fifth
Fifth
spot.
spot, yeah.
So we're connecting on that. But I'm a relator and you're a woo, which
Yeah.
is completely opposite.
Yeah.
Completely opposite. But it's that we have other things that we're connecting on, and then we have those differences that make us interesting to one another.
Okay.
And so usually in a good partnership, you're going to see both. You're going to see the connectors and you're going to see the completely opposite end
Okay.
things. Yeah.
Kind of going back onto when should people take the Strengths Finder? Like, how early should people take Strengths Finder?
I think Gallup has a book out, an assessment that 12 or 13-year-olds can take.
Okay.
Core Clarity here in Plano, Texas, they have done studies on bringing strengths into high schools,
Okay.
and then they've observed where those students have gone as far as like how well they have done through college and then outside, and
Yeah.
they saw amazing results.
Yeah.
And so they're looking at bringing strengths into the education system in a high school setting.
Yeah.
I think in high school we would all agree that we were fairly well developed enough to have these strengths there and developed.
I see.
And for me, there were some indicators. Like I took some other assessments, and it
Okay.
was, telling me what I should do with my life at
Yeah.
that time as I was
Yeah.
going into college. And those things have not changed, since high school
Yeah.
for sure. Um,
Or consistency.
Yeah, and just my interest in cultures,
Yeah.
for example, so that mix of that learner relator. I've always been an achiever since I can remember. I've always had discipline since I could remember. Ever since I started school, I feel like I've had discipline,
Yeah.
and consistency both. I've always needed a large amount of consistency in
Yeah.
my life. Whenever there wasn't, I was always very aware of it.
Yeah.
So man, I mean, I think you have these things from a very young age.
From a young age. Why I
Yeah.
asked you that is because I know in the school system even today, and it drives me crazy because I come from a cognitive neuroscience background, but they're teaching children about left brain and right brain, and to a certain extent that stuff is correct. But then if you tell somebody you're more left brain, right? That person's gonna grow up and be like, okay, so I am definitely more of a creative person. I'm gonna go into arts and stuff like that. And I think that's kind of like wrong, right? I mean,
Yeah, I think I'm with you on
yeah,
that.
because I have a sister, and she was like, oh, I think I'm more of the creative side, and that's why I don't enjoy the math as much. And I'm like, how do you know that? And I think it's because right now in the schools they're using the older system, and they're talking about things that are not much relevant anymore. There's no just black and white in that.
Yeah.
And I think what they need to teach children is to capitalize on their strengths or on what they're doing well. It doesn't even necessarily have to be strengths. It could just be things that they're doing really well on.
Yeah.
And just because you're good in math doesn't mean that you're not going to be good in poetry.
Exactly.
you know?
And it's all about not just what you're doing well, but what you enjoy. That's really
Exactly.
telling. A great example is I used to have a roommate, and she and I both played the piano. We would both sing. She was definitely a feeler. She was definitely way more creative. The way that she came at it was she would listen, and she had an ear for the music. I come at it much more logical. I know the chord structures, lots of practice, lots of mastering, and have tuned my ear into the sounds of it. So two completely different approaches, but the same result has come out of it in the sense of we both played the piano. We were both singers.
Yeah.
She was much better, but
Yeah.
yeah. So I think that you're right. You don't want to limit anything that you decide you do or that you want to do based on assessment, even Strengths Finder assessment. You want
Yeah.
to use it as a tool
As a tool.
to guide you and
Yeah.
to have yourself test some things out and learn about yourself.
Yeah, because essentially your brain is plastic and it's constantly changing by the things that you're doing, right? You're developing new neural networks from the kind of whether you're doing physical activity or learning an instrument or doing something else. Those changes do alter things in your brain.
Right.
Was one of the things that's really interesting to me when you first came into the school, and you were going through the Strengths Finder, I was a little like, I wonder how neuroscience fits into this, right?
Yeah.
And the thing is that right now we don't really have the tools to see, hey, look at Yusra's brain and, oh, she's an ideator. That's her top strength. We can't really do that. Maybe in the future we'll probably have a system that we're able to do that, but right now we're not able to do that. And I think that was like an hour-long conversation between you and I. And I realized that, wow, this stuff actually makes sense, And I have a psychology background, so yes, psychology and neuroscience sometimes clash a little bit.
Yeah.
But it makes sense, And we might not have the exact science behind it just yet, but eventually in the future we should be able to have something that helps us understand.
Yeah,
exactly
the science is there. It's just a matter of have we put it into a context yet that we can consume.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah, and I think a lot of it has to do with the tools. We don't have the tools for it, So, so that's one of the things that I wanted to ask you about is, like, do you have people that are like hesitant about taking StrengthsFinder because they feel like if they learn about their strengths and they don't want to?
Definitely.
Yeah.
Lots of hesitations. One, people who are analytical completely discount it from the beginning, and they are like, I'm not taking that thing. You have to show them statistics around it and data around it, around the results, and then they'll be like, okay. I'll maybe buy into this. And then they'll take it. So it's so funny when I have people that don't want to take it. I'm like, okay, you're either analytical or you're an ideator, because ideators don't like being put in that box. They're like, what box?
Yeah.
And so you can usually tell somebody's strengths based on their reaction to taking the assessment, which is interesting. Some people have told me they're terrified of seeing the results because they know it will change their path.
I see.
And so that's an aversion to change, even though the change would be good.
Yeah. Is that because people are kind of like afraid to learn about them?
They are stuck and comfortable in what they're doing, what they know. They have a good situation.
Oh, I see.
They're afraid that the results are going to tell them to do something else, and they're happy where they're at.
Yeah.
Where what they don't realize is that by taking the assessment, you don't have to do anything if you don't want to.
Right.
Number one. Number two, it should make your current situation better.
Yeah.
But it could be a situation where someone's saying, I know if I take the assessment and I get these results, then I know I'm going to want to change.
Yeah.
And I just don't want to go through that right now. So they could just be shelving it and say, maybe later when I'm sick of what I'm doing, then maybe I'll take it and find out. So there's lots of reasons.
When I was a district manager, I was managing about 16 managers at that point. And they were responsible for teams of sales leaders. I had them take the DISC assessment. And it was because that's what our company at that point would suggest
administer.
we take, and all that stuff.
That's what they used,
and, I liked it. I think it was really interesting. And I think that StrengthsFinder, on the other hand, is a little bit more. I mean, you said there's 34 different strengths, right?
Correct.
Versus DISC is just...
Which is 4.
Yeah, 4. Big difference there. So I think, like, managers can really take advantage of actually doing this, right?
Yes.
Are organizations taking advantage of the fact that they can...
Some are.
Okay.
Yeah, for example, Charles Schwab is a great example of a company who is inundated with strengths.
Okay.
And so there's a lot of things you can do with strengths in an organization. At base level, you can cover it with individuals and give them individual coaching. But then you can get into team dynamics.
Okay.
So you can have the whole room filled with the team and them getting to know one another's strengths and learning how to interact with one another in a way that engages the other person's strengths. And then, of course, you can have the manager-employee relationship. And a lot of times I've been asked to come in and facilitate that discussion so that there's a neutral party in there to say, okay, you're like this and you're like this. And so how can we work really well together?
Okay.
Manager, how can you bring out their strengths and maximize their strengths?
I see. Okay.
And then, of course, there's a discussion around, okay, but how do we make this like part of our culture?
Okay.
And so that might be like printing out posters and everybody's posters up so that the entire company has the language of strengths and is talking about one another's strengths and how to use them. And you can go so far to get into the HR organization where you're saying, okay, can I come to HR and say, my strengths aren't being engaged in this role? Is there another role for the company that I could use my strengths? And here are my strengths.
Okay.
And of course, HR could also add it into the annual review process every year or some sort of quarterly, the question would be, to your employees, are your strengths engaged on a daily basis?
Okay.
Because if they are, then you have an engaged employee. Their performance is going to be much higher. It's usually like 8% higher on an individual basis.
Okay.
It can even be 12.5% higher on a team basis.
Yeah.
If you're using strengths on
Yeah.
a daily basis. So, revenue goes up, profit goes up, turnover goes down.
Yeah.
Everybody's happier. It's usually creates an extremely good culture, extremely positive culture when you're using a strengths-based approach, because you're not focusing on weaknesses or criticizing.
Yeah,
All you're
that's
trying to
true.
do is say, okay, this is what you do well. How can we bring that out even more every year?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's true. I felt when I took the DISC assessment, I was a really solid I and like a low D. So then I wasn't like anything from an S or a C. So I felt like, wow. So I'm not analytical, and I'm not like, S I think stood for sincere Sam. And and I was like, that's interesting that I only have like 2, and I don't, it just makes you feel like it's a strong label that
Yes.
goes on you.
And the question is, what do you do with that information now that you have it?
That's true.
And I think that's the thing I love about
You
Gallup.
brag about it.
Yeah.
That I am
Yeah.
an I.
I'm a D. Yeah. No, I think the wonderful thing about Strengths Finder is that it actually gives you actions to take on an individual basis to go try and
Yeah.
see how they work for you.
Yeah. So I really liked how you sent me that. I don't
They
know
were
what
like
to call it.
visualizations, right?
Visualizations,
Of your
and
strengths.
it
Yeah.
color coded. It helped me understand. And when we had our second conversation, you came here and you said if I wanted to reach out to you, I did. So I did, and I told you, I'm like, I really don't know what I want to do.
Yes.
And that was my ideation, being frustrated, and coming in and telling you like, hey, what do I do? What kind of a career do I want to go into?
And you did have a number of ideas of things that you could do.
Yeah, I have a psychology background. I am passionate about neuroscience and have a background in cognitive science. I've been in marketing and sales and leadership and management. What do I do?
And probably done
you know?
well in most of them.
Yeah, because I mean, I don't know where my achiever is, but I really I have my woo. So I go in there and I'm like, okay, I'm gonna be the best one at this.
Yeah.
So
That sounds a little like competition.
yeah. But I enjoy that, because especially in the sales environment, you have to be competitive.
Yeah.
So that's like the kind of struggle I went through, and I think it developed me into more of a competitive person. I wasn't always that competitive, but it happens. And I think that's another thing, right? Like, it's also nature versus nurture. People talk about, like, do we have these strengths from where we're born, or do we develop them over a period of time? But then you mentioned, does it matter?
Yeah.
Like,
You have them.
yeah,
Let's
you
just
have
use
them. So now let's utilize them. Let's capitalize on them. And I think that's really interesting, because that's when we're trying to go into the neuroscience and we start looking at brains and stuff.
Yeah.
Then that's putting like a solid, like, this is what you have inside your brain, and a label on you. Whereas like knowing your strengths is a little bit different. I feel.
Yeah, and I wonder, like, with your competition, that competitiveness that kind of came out, it makes me wonder if it's in your top 10 strengths. Like, if
Is that a strength?
it is a strength.
Ooh,
And maybe you've never been in competition before, or played sports, or
So I will tell you one thing. So I grew up in Pakistan, and education in Pakistan is extremely competitive.
Okay.
So you're you have like exams twice a year.
Yeah.
It's kind of like college, and they're very serious. You study for them. Like, as a child, I was like 6 years old, up till like 4 o'clock in the morning,
Interesting.
studying.
So you're building those little
Yeah.
synapses, right?
Yeah. So and my mom was a teacher, so it was so difficult for me. So I had to study like all night and go take an exam at like 8 in the morning, and it was like a 4-hour exam. It was very like coordinated, like your SAT type thing. Take the exam, and then you would be ranked. You wouldn't just get a score. I mean, you were announced like at what percentage you scored, and then and then your picture, like, they would take a picture of you, and if you got like first, second, or third position, your picture goes up.
I see.
Yeah, and you get to take a picture with the teacher, and
Yeah.
of course everybody wants to take a picture with the teacher. So I think that competitive side was developed.
Yeah.
And
Either that, or it was engaged early on.
Yeah.
There might have been some people that didn't perform well in that system at all.
Yeah.
And then I start wondering if, competitiveness is a strength of your culture, right? Of of that area of the earth, because you do see that
so culture is called
you
can
do
also,
well
yeah.
you see a certain genetic pool of people
Yeah.
in certain areas of the world that have more of a certain particular strength than other areas of the world.
That's
so
true.
so then you're like, well, what exactly is culture? It's the genetics of the people, how they're wired. And so for example, in a lot of the Asia countries, they have huge amounts of harmony,
Yeah.
that you see come up in their strength sets,
Yeah.
and in weird pairings of harmony.
Yeah.
So I've seen someone with harmony in command, and that's like, that is so weird. You never see that.
That's like opposites, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Okay.
complete opposites, but in
Yeah.
the same top five.
So is it good to have like opposite strengths in the top
I think
five?
it's wonderful, because
Yeah.
then you're balancing yourself out.
Yeah.
And you can tap into your harmony when you need to, and you can tap into your command when you need to, for example.
Okay.
And then, it's sort of like, how do they play out? That's the interesting thing. Like, maybe your motivation is to create the harmony, and in order to do that, sometimes you need to step up to the plate and be a commander to achieve
Yeah.
the harmony.
I see.
Yeah, so they can all play out together in amazing ways, even if they are opposites.
I see.
One time I met someone who was a restorative and maximizer, and it's a 0% chance that those get put in the same top five.
Okay. Okay.
And so very, very, very rare.
Uh-huh.
And so not only did he like to maximize people that were already high performing, he liked to maximize their performance,
Yeah.
but he also likes to fix the broken things. And that's
Okay.
usually, those two strengths usually don't go together, but he happened to have both. So you should see his backyard, because he develops and builds things from scratch and restores them and then maximizes them as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I want to kind of wrap things up,
Yeah.
because I think we can talk about this forever.
I think we could talk about it for hours.
Yeah. So I wanted to say thank you. And I think one of the things I learned is it's better to take your Strengths Finder earlier and also consult with a coach. Because I think I would have, I waited
Yeah.
like almost 3 years to
Yeah.
meet you in person and discover this.
Yeah.
And in those 3 years, like I had doubts. I had to figure out like what exactly I wanted to do, and essentially, if you know your strengths earlier, then you know how to use them, and you
Right.
can be confident in yourself.
Yeah, and I find what you've just said really interesting, because all athletes have a coach and they have mentors, those high performing athletes that we watch on TV. And yet there's so many people who want to be high performers in their life and in their jobs that would never get a coach. And a coach is not somebody to go around telling you what to do. The coach is there to bring out the best in you so that you can have the success that you want.
Yeah.
And if they're a good coach, then they're figuring out how to use your strengths to do that so that it works for you. Like, I would never tell you to go sit in a dark cave and study. I would say you need to get out among the people and, collaborate
Yeah.
in your studies, for example. And so I think that anybody who wants to be great at what they do, and at work or at the church or, in a volunteer activity or with a relationship,
Yeah.
I think everybody needs a coach.
I think so.
Yeah, someone that takes the time for them just to focus on
Yeah.
them and say, hey, this is what you are great at, and this is what you should focus on, and this is where you should spend your energy and your time if you really want to have the maximum amount of success in your
Yeah.
life.
I think working with you in particular, Brandy, because you're also a fitness trainer.
That's correct.
So, the reason why we're doing this video is because you encouraged me, We moved from an audio platform to this.
This is true.
Because you were like, you know what? Let's try a video. I think you'd be really good at that. And we'll find out. But it's true. If it
Yeah.
wasn't for you to encourage me and push me, I wouldn't be here, to try and experiment and learn something new and
Right.
meet new people and develop those connections. So
Yeah.
I 100% agree with that. And I think I recently came across some articles that talked about the importance of having a coach in your life. And I think it was like for CEOs, they need coaches. And there are like coaching institutions out there that are helping
Yep.
people become better managers.
Yeah. Yeah, there's executive coaching for sure, but
Yeah.
I really think everybody in an organization can
organization.
benefit from
Yeah.
coaching. And I think people don't realize that you start at a base level in an organization, but then you become the expert, and then you become the manager, and then you become the leaders and the directors of the organization over
True.
time.
Yeah.
It's the natural progression of things. And so the earlier on you get a coach and really truly understand how you can interact with other people to have success,
Yeah.
the more successful you'll be.
Okay.
Yes.
Well, thank you so much, Brandy.
Thank you
I
for having
appreciate
me.
it.